Good afternoon and welcome. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I'm an architect, and I feel only a little bit strange to be here at this Women's Health Conference, but the theme being green, go green, think lean. Architecture does tie into that, the concept very well, actually. So I'm here to talk about sustainable design and architecture, and how important it is to build green, because it's for the long term. So, green building is an environmentally responsible and resource efficient type of building. It's architecture that minimizes the negative environmental impacts of buildings by efficiency. The goal is to effectively reduce the overall impact of the built environment on human health and natural environment and increase comfort and livability. So that's what green building is about. This is consistent with the AIA-sponsored Architecture Challenge 2030. I don't know if many of you are aware, but this is a movement taken on by the AIA president to take an effective leadership role in the crisis of climate change. It's been shown that the building industry is actually the worst culprit in this problem. And this was not obvious to many, but as more and more smart people looked into this, it became evident that, wow, buildings are really the consumers of the vast amount of energy and the creation of greenhouse gases. So it's very very critical to change the way we design and build buildings to effectively address the problems that they create. So this is, in a nutshell, the Architecture 2030 goal is, through incremental steps, reduce the fossil fuel consumption of buildings by measurable metrics each 5 years, so that by 2030 we reach a carbon neutral state. That means that the amount of energy required to heat, cool, and light the buildings is offset by an on-site power generation source that is also renewable. In other words, it's solar or wind or geothermal, something that's earth friendly, so that we don't have to build any more power plants. So architects are key to leading, or at least being involved in this, in how the sustainability of the sustainable design takes place. So, while our built environment constitutes the problem, sustainable design and building offers the solution. Green building aims to reduce the environmental impact of buildings. Clear and simple. The first rule is that it's always better to not build at all. If you have an existing building, then that is preferable to building new altogether, because new building always degrades the environment, and if we have plenty of building stock, adaptively reusing buildings, converting them to new uses to suit our needs is far less energy intensive and far more preferable. So the second rule is that every building should be as small as possible. The third is to not contribute to sprawl. So there's several sustainable design strategies that are important that I'd like to illustrate. Siting and structure design efficiency, energy and materials efficiency, renewable energy production, water efficiency and water conservation, very important in our state, and then the use of recycled content materials. So the next few slides are going to illustrate these concepts. Well, back in time, Vitruvius, actually BC writer and designer, had elaborated or had established that for good architecture, you require durability, function, and beauty. Now, in our age, there's a fourth principle, and that's sustainability. But you cannot forego the other three in place of sustainability. Sustainability, it just gets added on to that. It still has to be beautiful, functional, and durable. So nowadays, the current goal of sustainable architecture is net zero buildings. So we are aiming toward reducing the amount of energy used in the building by design to make the load of the building as small as possible. Then it's manageable, it's easy in fact, to provide that amount of energy with an on-site renewable energy system like wind or photovoltaics. So the paradigm is first reduce, then produce. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just put a massive photovoltaic array on a very inefficient building. That's not good design. So this is an example of a net zero house. Incorporates the following design strategies. First and foremost is to orient the building facade to the north and the south. You minimize east and west exposures. You use a super insulated exterior skin. You use clear story windows for natural daylighting, so you don't need electric lights turned on during the day. You have the proper shading of window glazing, high efficiency HVAC equipment, high performance windows, high efficiency lighting, and occupancy sensor controls. Then you have an on-site renewable energy system, photovoltaic array or wind turbine. So the next slides are going to illustrate each of these bullet points that I've just gone over. First of all, passive solar design, east-west orientation. So you can see that the building is primarily oriented to the south and the north, where it's very easy to control how the sun enters the building. You want the sun to come in the wintertime for passive heating. You don't want the sun to come in the summertime. And with the right, the right length overhang or awning, it's very easy to do that. So the next slide, super insulation. Super insulation means going beyond the code minimum. Code minimum in our area requires about R13 or R15 for the wall. You want to do R30 for a super insulated wall. You want to do R60 for the super insulated ceiling. This results in an extremely well insulated envelope, which will keep the heat and cool in that you're trying to maintain. This reduces the energy loads dramatically. You can also see that in the slide, in this slide here. It's a very effective way to get a double insulated wall, but they stagger the studs so that there's no thermal bridging. The studs constitute a weakness, in other words, a thermal bridge where heat transfer will go more rapidly. So by staggering the studs, you minimize that amount of heat transfer. It works very well. Daylighting. So windows up high in the space, shaded on the south, doesn't even require much shading on the north, will bring in ambient daylight and eliminate the need for electric lights on during the day. So these are very effective strategies that have demonstrated, especially in classrooms, for example, these high-performance classrooms, very effective to have natural daylighting, and it's been proven in testing that the kids test much better. The learning environment is better when they have natural daylighting to work by. But it's the same with a house. I mean, it just feels better. So shading devices. As I mentioned, awnings to shade the glass, exterior louvers. The idea is to keep the sun off the glass. Once it's inside the space, then it's already heating up the space. You've got, so this is an example of a properly sized overhang. It's admitting the low angle winter sun, which is what you want, but it's blocking the high angle summer sun, which is also what you want. And that's a south facing window. In this diagram, we see that an effectively placed deciduous tree in the wintertime lets the sun in, summertime blocks it out. So as simple as that. Retractable canopy awning, and in this case, a retractable shade. Now, these are kind of retrofit options that were installed after they realized that, geez, you know, if they had designed proper overhangs, then this, for example, wouldn't have been required. Okay, another component is after you've made your building energy efficient by the levels of insulation and the design, then you will need a much smaller cooling system in our climate, for example, to take care of the cooling load. But a high SEER system will operate at even greater efficiency. And so this is taking it to another level, as well as a properly sized mechanical system, so that it's not oversized. Typically, mechanical systems are oversized, and they're as soon as the thermostat registers, you know, that it needs to kick on, it blows too much air in, quickly cooling down the space in the summertime, for example, and then it cycles off. And then 5 minutes later, that cool air is dissipated and it cycles back on. It's called short cycling. It's a result of not adequate insulation or adequate sealing of the building and an oversized HVAC system, which just runs continuously and costs. And this is where you're getting bills of $500, $600, $700 a month. I mean, you know, when you've got this scenario, and that's the reality. So a properly designed mechanical system is another critical aspect to the whole equation. Yes?
What's SEER?
SEER, seasonal energy efficiency ratio. And the higher the SEER value, the better. Nowadays, they're up into the 18, even 22 range. The higher the SEER value, the more efficient the system is, basically. But you do pay a premium for these high SEER cooling systems. And with a very properly designed house and with high levels of insulation and sealing, you probably won't even need a high efficiency system. You can get away with a less efficient system and a smaller one at that. So the overall design of the building is really important to minimize, to integrate everything and maximize the efficiency, minimize the loads. Yeah. Okay, so then another part of this is the windows, since much of the heat gain and loss is through the windows. They represent the weak part of the wall envelope. So nowadays it's typical to use dual glaze windows with low emissivity. Emissivity is a property that will bounce heat back from the outside, but keep it in on the inside. It works very well. But in extreme climates, and even in this climate, I've seen them use triple glazing, which can get an R value of up to 11 or 13 with some manufacturers. Yes?
We have marble windows in the house.
Yeah.
We took more time determining what kind of windows we wanted than whether we were to get married or not. Months to figure out the windows, and we got married like in 4 months instead.
Yeah.
But I mean, we really studied them. But it seems to me that over the years, do they become less effective?
No, they shouldn't. They shouldn't degrade appreciably over a long period of time, at least 30 years. I mean, they should stay very.
Is there a gas in between?
There's a gas, yes.
Would that degrade in some way?
I haven't heard of that, but I'd have to look into it. Yeah, but the most effective gases are argon and krypton. Krypton is even more effective as an insulator, and that's why with a triple glaze and two layers, gas gaps on either side of the middle layer, really increases the efficiency, yeah, measurably. So that's high performance glazing. And then, of course, high efficiency lighting. LEDs are, I'm sure you've all seen these. They're becoming commonplace now, and as they become used more, the price comes down too. But they're extremely efficient lighting, and in most cases, once you install the LED, you don't ever replace it. They last for 40,000 hours or something. Okay, another aspect to the sustainability pie is materials efficiency. So when you're doing new construction or an addition, there's a great variety of materials that are very sustainable because they're derived from, they're either recycled content materials or they're made from renewable sources, like these roof trusses, for example. All 2x4s. So there's no large growth timbers required to build this roof. Very economical, very sustainable. These products like these I-joists and engineered beams, also primarily made from recycled material. And then here's another, this is a method of framing called optimum value engineering, where instead of studs spacing at 16 inches on center, which is conventional, they space the studs 24 on center. The siding and gypboard can still span 24 inches, but you effectively use a third less studs, and you increase your insulation value by a third. So it's a great way to build. Even though it's a great idea, some builders are still reticent to embrace it because it's new, it's newer, and construction industry is kind of likes to do things the same way. Okay, examples of renewable energy available today: PV shingles. These are the most common that you see all over now. These polycrystalline type of PVs, and because they're very efficient and the prices come down dramatically. This is a less efficient but a more streamlined, more integrated type of a PV. It's only 3/16 of an inch thick and can lay in between the seams of a standing seam roof and almost disappears. And then they have some interesting things like PV glass. Not super efficient, but produces and interesting and still lets light in. And then, of course, there's micro wind turbines. And depending on where you live, this could be a very effective renewable on-site energy source also. Okay, another aspect of the puzzle is water conservation. So in California, native California plantings arranged in hydrozones so that each plant group, you group the plants with similar water needs, and therefore you reduce waste there. Everything should be controlled by a weather-based controller, so that depending on the weather conditions, your garden gets less or more water. It's standard for commercial developments nowadays. They're required to have this. And not too far in the future, I'm sure that residential design will require these as well. Another idea is rain barrels. It's kind of an old-fashioned idea that is still valid today. Cisterns. Okay. So far, most of these slides have been about new construction and what you can do if you're starting new or doing an addition. But many people have an existing house, and it may not be the most efficient house. There's still a lot you can do. So to reduce energy, to save money, to increase comfort, livability, and increase your home value. The first most effective energy retrofit measure you can make is to air seal the house. This is by means of caulking and visqueen where it matters, where it is required. You effectively seal off all the gaps in the house so that the air stays in. When this is done, it has to be done by a qualified person who can also evaluate your gas-burning appliances and to properly ensure that they are vented out of the building. If there's any leaks that are, and there's a gas leak in your house, and suddenly you seal this tight, then you've got a real problem. So it's very important that this is done by qualified professionals, and I'll get to that in a minute. But air sealing, number one. These are some of the tools that are used by qualified contractors. This is a blower door where they're pulling out all the indoor air and ejecting it to the exterior. This creates a vacuum, and then air is drawn in from outside through any cracks in the building, and that is measured. Then they can identify where your leaks are. Here's another tool, a thermal infrared camera that shows where heat is escaping or coming in through gaps in insulation, for example. The next most effective thing you can do is to insulate. And if you can super insulate, great, but even just proper insulation is more important. If you have an uninsulated house, then you would want to insulate the ceiling first and then the walls. And this is my own house, actually. And I used a product that's blown in. The problem with batt insulation is that it's almost impossible to install it perfectly. There's always gaps. Wherever you have a gap, you've got a breach in your envelope. The blown-in products seal as they insulate, so they get into every corner, cranny, nook, even around vent pipes, and there's no way that batt insulation can do that. Batt insulation is cheap, but it also it doesn't get you very much. So this is not an expensive product, but far superior because it actually seals as it insulates. So this is blown-in cellulose. It's made from recycled newsprint, borate treated so it won't burn and insects won't eat it, and it's very, very effective product. In the roof, if you were to enclose an attic, for example, then you can blow this cellulose insulation between the rafter bays, and then as an added layer, you could add rigid insulation to the underside of that, and then create a very effective insulation layer at the roof. So if these measures were taken, then your HVAC system, the mechanical system for cooling, would be greatly reduced. Question?
So do you, in your own home, is that as you were building, or can you go into an existing home?
Right. This was, in this case, this was an addition, and so it was very easy to do this. But with existing construction, it's possible to use the same method, but they blow in, they drill holes in between each stud cavity and blow the material in. In extreme cases, you can also remove the drywall, but and blow it in, and then you're ensured that everything is solid. But if they drill the holes and you know, and are careful and install each, you know, hit each bay, then it works very well.
So you don't have to rip your walls down?
You don't have to. No, no. And then it's just patching and repairing the drywall from the inside. Yeah. Yes.
And the price, how does that compare to regular installation?
Oh, it's comparable. Yes, it is more for sure, but it's maybe a third more roughly, but it's far better. Because it works so much more effectively than bad insulation. So, yeah. Okay, with windows. It's preferable to caulk and seal your windows first, if that's if you can do that. If your windows are so old that they're sort of beyond repair, then it's acceptable to replace them, but at considerable expense. Windows are very expensive, and so that's why this is kind of a lower on the list energy retrofit thing to do. This is my own house again, which is an historic house. But the windows were 120 years old, and they were not salvageable. They were in such bad shape. So I actually got estimates to rehabilitate the windows, to actually rebuild them, and it was more than the cost of new windows. It didn't make sense. So, you know, preservation has to be practical too. And anyway, the new windows come with a warranty. The rehabbed windows wouldn't have, you know. So in this case, I embraced the notion of new windows, but was careful to ensure that they were of the same kind of window, the same frame material, wood in this case, Victorian house, and had them match the historic details of the windows, so that I maintained the historic integrity of the building.
But the glass isn't the same.
But the glass is brand new, and it's actually dual glazed and low E and all that. And argon? Yes, so you see this, yeah, and that's the beauty of historic windows, and that's why I'm telling you, yeah, you know, that should be the last thing you should do if you own a historic home. Do all these other things first. Keep your windows. Yeah, I mean, you know, unless they're in such bad shape that you know that you got to rebuild them, or they're all broken, or you know. But honestly, because those, because the new windows will not replace that beautiful, you know, wave effect. That's for sure. Okay, of course, energy efficiency appliances. That's kind of common sense, but I mention it here just because this is another thing that is easy to do, including tankless water heaters, which are very energy efficient, gas-fired tankless. They work very well, and your refrigerator is an energy hog, and if you have an old one, then wow, you can save a lot of money just by replacing that. But the newer tank-style heaters are also very, very good. And so it really just depends on, I can't say the tankless is better than the tank. It just depends on your situation. But if they're Energy Star rated, then you know that they're good. Okay, finally, green materials. And there's a lot of them out there. And the problem is, a lot of materials are greener than others, and a lot of manufacturers try to tell you that they're green when maybe they're not. I mean, so you really have to, kind of do your own research, honestly. There's a lot of greenwashing out there, and that's no lie. But for sure, materials like bamboo, beautiful material, that's very great for flooring, for cabinetry, even countertops. I mean. But you should also be careful where it comes from. A lot of the bamboo is coming from China, and it's coming from such a long distance that it's in a certain way it loses its value of being a really green material because of the carbon footprint of the transportation Yeah. So it's preferable to obtain materials from local sources first. I mean, local or closer sources, like within 500 miles is considered green. So a lot of this is coming from Seattle and that area, and that's a lot better. Sisal is also just interesting, very environmentally benign material, fabrics and rugs and tapestries, things like that. A lot of colors, a lot of design. Linoleum, huge application in flooring mostly, and it's been used for years in medical, in healthcare settings because it's hygienic. It doesn't off-gas any pollutants, and and nowadays the new linoleums are a lot more color choice, a lot more variation, and they're quite beautiful. So we use those a lot. And then the wood that we specify these days should come from FSC certified. That means the Forest Stewardship Council, and they're charged with overseeing the logging and forestry practices of these mills. So if it's FSC certified, that means that they're abiding by the sustainable practices of logging. So they're not clear cutting, they're not taking down more than they're replanting, so that the net result stays the same. The stone is also considered a green material just because extraction processes are pretty mild compared with this manufactured stone, which requires a lot more heat and pollutants, and it's beautiful, the Caesar stone and these other products, but they're not actually as green as the real stuff. So granites, sandstones, limestones, beautiful, and a good choice. And also, if you can get it closer, if you can find out where the source is, then that's better. A lot of them are coming from China and India, and they're exotic and they're beautiful, and it's a choice you can make. But but there are other closer to home sources too. So these are my takeaway tips. First of all, energy conservation. Increasing the efficiency of your home by air sealing and adding high levels of insulation. Those are the two best things you can do to make your home more efficient. Don't go out and get a new mechanical system first. That's what you do. You do these two things first. The idea is to make your house like a thermos, so very tight and very insulated. Yeah. Qualified contractors, and that will be my next slide. Because you want to get the right people in there who understand the science of building construction, and a lot of contractors don't, and you have to be careful. So, energy conservation, passive heating. Okay, on days like today, where it's a winter day but the sun's out, the sun angle is low. Open up your blinds, let that nice sun in, and at night shut the blinds, and you've gained some free heat. So that's passive heating. Passive cooling, keep that high angle sun off your glass by overhangs, shades, shutters, or canopies. All those work very, very effectively. The problem, because once the sun is striking the glass, it's too late. It's in the space, and then you've got to deal with it through cooling, and then daylighting. To keep rooms bright, a lot of things you can do. Well, just really paint or paper the walls with light reflective colors is effective. Bounces the light around, and then windows. Oftentimes we have hot days and cool nights, so very effective to open the windows at night, let that cool air in, and in the morning, shut it tight, and you've captured cool. Yeah.
House fans are good.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, they work very well too, by exhausting that heat out. Ventilation, just passive ventilation, especially if you can open up one window on one side of the house, another on the other, then you pull those breezes through and you don't have to run your cooler as much. Water conservation, a smart weather-based system is key, and everyone should have one. I think it's the most ridiculous thing to drive down the street, it's raining, and you see someone's sprinklers on. It's you know, doesn't make any, you know, so that's an important thing that can be done, you know, right away. Yes?
And you can purchase one of those at Lowe's?
I think they have them at the major places. I think that you also want to work with, you might want to talk with a landscape installer though, and make sure that it's coupled with a smart irrigation system so that so for example, if your grass lawn should be on one zone, your plants and shrubs should be on another, your trees should be on another. So you should have multiple zones, all designed according to the water needs, and then that coupled with the smart controller will take care of it. But yeah, you probably want to talk with an irrigation contractor just to make it work right. Lighting, converting to LEDs, appliances, Energy Star rated, and then earth-friendly materials, bamboo, sisal, linoleum, natural stone. Finally, finding a contractor who knows how to do this, and a lot of them may say they do, and they may not. So, BPI.org. This is the Building Performance Institute, and they are a very they are the experts on this, really, and they put out these briefs that are exhaustively detailed, and they provide training, they seminars, and it's high tech stuff. This is building science, and it's you need to have these things done by a qualified contractor, especially because of the potential dangers that can occur if it's done incorrectly. So there are a number of qualified contractors out there, many in this area. So that's what I have.